Good morning. Jumping Bean here. It's early in the morning. Nobody's up but me. You're going to have to drink some coffee to keep me awake while I talk. Okay, well, today I thought I would tell you about how my husband and I met. When we were both, well, let me rephrase. I was 16 and had just gotten my working papers here in New York, and I think David must have lied because he was only 15 and you don't get working papers then unless you're on a farm. We met at the New York State Thruway restaurant. There would be a lot of traffic on the Thruway because it was summertime. We were both out of school for the summer. He went to the city school, I went to a county school, which meant I had 76 approximately kids in my class, and he probably had a few hundred in his. I remember the day I first met him. I was quite taken by his good-looking hair and his cute face. Anyhow, we frequently would get big bus loads of tourists coming through, and we worked in the snack bar. So the bus would pull up, 50, 60 people would get off the bus, would cram into the snack bar and want their soda, their hamburger, their hot dog, whatever. It was just simple things in the snack bar. However, there was a sit-down restaurant also, but they didn't have time. So David was working on the fryer. He was cooking hamburgers and hot dogs. I was doing cold drinks because I was new. He had already been there a couple of weeks. He and his buddy went together, and Ray, I'm not sure what Ray was doing, but he kept bringing stock out and stuff for us. Anyhow, we were fixing things fast as can be, and I'm not quite sure why I thought I had to take over his cooking, because David was always very thorough and somewhat patient and kind of took his time. And all the years we were married, he referred to me as a dog in heat because I couldn't sit still. I had to keep moving, and I wanted to get the job done quickly. So for whatever reason, I was fixing drinks and putting them up on the counter with the straws and yelling out what they were. People were just grabbing them. And I thought maybe he needed a little help. So I moved over 6 feet to the fryer area and the cooking, big aluminum or steel, whatever it is, big cooking place where you put your hot dogs and hamburgers. And I'm not sure what I almost did, or I'm not sure how I did it, but I almost cut off his finger. So here we are with blood running all over the hamburgers and hot dogs. He's bleeding. I'm thinking, oh my God, what the hell did I do to this guy that I thought was quite cute? And anyhow, so he got bandaged up and back on the grill, and I got sent back over to my drinks. And that was probably the first time that I got to work with him. Another time, I got closed in the refrigerator. There's great big walk-in refrigerators, and another guy had closed me in. I think he thought he was being funny. And I'm banging on the door, and David wonders what's going on. He opens the door, and there I am. I said, hi, you're my hero. You rescued me. Oh, one very, very, very interesting fact. Now, I won't tell you my Social Security number, of course, but let's just say it was 000000000. Okay? He was 000000001. David was exactly the very next number after me, which he got his working papers and Social Security number in the city where he lived. I got mine at the local post office, I think, in the small village where I lived. And when we did get married, a couple years later, we were doing our income tax for the first time, and I wrote down my Social Security number, and he looked at it, and he showed me his to be exactly one number before me was quite amazing. Because think of all the people that got Social Security number and kids that got numbers that summer. To have him and I exactly one number apart and getting married at age 18. Coffee break. Black coffee, if you can see. Early days of our marriage. Oh, well, the minister who married us tried to talk David out of marrying me. He knew me. He didn't really know David, but he knew we were young. We were only 18. And I was in college because it was in the fall. And here comes one of the dogs. Hi, Dixon. Hi, buddy. He's the chubby white one, the bulldog that always comes in to see me. To be quite honest, he knows I have graham crackers. So, anyhow, the minister thought probably we were too young to be getting married. But, hey, we lasted 45 years. Not without trials and tribulations. However, I could tell the minute he looked in my eyes that he was the guy for me. And obviously, I was the spirited young dog in heat that he wanted. So, we had a very small wedding and a reception. David was the youngest of 4 boys. I was the youngest of 5. So there had already been quite a few weddings and whatnot before us. So we didn't do anything major. We just had a quiet church wedding, small reception, and we were happy to do that. In our early years, I really did not know how to cook. I knew how to make black coffee. And David's grandmother was a very good cook. In fact, his mother was also a good cook, but she worked a lot. So he lived with the other boys, with the mother and the grandmother. The mother was divorced, so she had moved back in with her mother. So the grandmother had a lot of influence over the boys growing up. David always had a dog. He had a Cocker Spaniel, and however, eventually the grandmother took over the dog when David and I got married, but he was always a lover of dogs, and we always had dogs when we were married. We had quite a few. After a while, I was, out of the daughter-in-laws, the first one to have a baby. So I had the first grandchild, and I sensed that there was probably a little bit of jealousy, and since I was the youngest and I was having the first grandchild, I was very close to David's mom. So she used to buy, oh my God, outfit after outfit after outfit for my son Christopher. Now, I am not very tall. We've discussed this. I'm small. And Christopher weighed 9.5 pounds and was 21.5 inches long. So he was a big baby. He looked like 3 months old when he came out. But he was a nice baby. He was a good baby. He slept well. So motherhood to me was a joy. And I was very happy to be a mother. Life went on. I only caused food poisoning once, and that was when I was still pregnant, I believe. I had made some sort of tomatoey dish, something I can't remember, but I had used an aluminum disposable pan to make it in. And of course we didn't eat it all the first night, put it in the refrigerator, and apparently the tomato acid ate the aluminum off the pan, and the next time we had leftovers, I poisoned us both. But you know, young couple, we ate a lot of chicken patties. I remember that, and probably macaroni and cheese. But I wasn't much of a cook, didn't want to necessarily cook, and my mother really never taught me how to cook. I was the last of several kids, and she was probably, you know, a little tired of showing people how to cook and how to keep house and all that. So I was kind of a self-taught housekeeper. And if you rate me on a scale of 1 to 10, I would be a 7.5. I tend to be someone who hangs on to stuff. I like all my things. I like all my Pyrex bowls and all the things that I have. And whether I use them or not, I keep them. And that's been a problem because when I moved from Florida, from a big 4,000 square foot house to my current home in Charlotte area, I downsized, and I still have several boxes that I haven't even gone through. And it's been 3 years, maybe going on 4 in August. Oh well. Anyhow, back to my early days. During the next year, my mother died unexpectedly, and I ended up buying her home in the little village where I had gone to high school when I got pregnant for Shannon. Now, Shannon was a 10-pound baby, 22 inches long, so she even surpassed Christopher. And I think they were still wondering how the heck I ever delivered that one. We had a lot of fun in those days. David was working. I was staying home with 2 babies. Let's see, Chris would have been about 3 when Shannon was born. We had a St. Bernard dog, Bernie, who used to pull the kids on the sled. Christopher would hook them up. Chris was the first type of kid who took things apart and put them back together, maybe with an extra piece or 2, you never knew. But he was a very smart kid. He still is. He's very intelligent. But he would rope up that dog, hook him to the sled. The next thing I know, I was putting Shannon, who was probably 6 to 8 months old, on the sled, supervising while Chris would walk the dog. Well, next thing I know, Chris is on the sled with the baby, and they're going down the street. Bernie was a big, big dog. So here I am chasing him down the street, calling him. He stopped, but Christopher was hooting and hollering, having a great time, and Shannon was screaming because they were going down the middle of the road in the winter, and she wasn't sure what was going on because she was just young. But, you know, hey, young parents, we don't always do the right things, but I love those kids. I eventually, when Shannon was about 2 or 3, went back to college and into nursing. So I was full-time in nursing school, and I worked a little part-time job in the afternoons and evenings at a pharmacy, just to bring in a little extra income. When you're young, you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of anything, you struggle. But that's what keeps you close, I think. In fact, I can remember one time getting gasoline, and we had a whole bunch of quarters that were the real silver quarters before they started putting like the copper in the middle of them. And the gas station attendant, an older, nice man who had been there for many years, looked at David and he says, these quarters are valuable. You know, I don't think you want to buy gasoline with them. But it was all we had at the time, so we bought $2 or $3 worth of gasoline with our silver quarters back in the day, and made it work. Eventually, David went to work at the Miller Brewery that was probably 12, 15 miles away from our home, and he worked in the brew house. He worked several different places, I believe, but he mostly worked in the brew house. And one day he got scalded when some hot syrup, some sort of hops or something, went down his big rubber boots and scalded his leg. That was one incident, and he was out of work for a little while for that. I remember taking him back and forth to physical therapy where they had to debride the area, which meant remove the dead skin, and that was, I know, very, very painful for David. And then they would have him in a whirlpool bath to try to improve the circulation in his leg. But he did recover, and I think that was probably the worst thing that happened that year. Eventually, we had a new home built. We were doing better financially. And then we had a swimming pool put in. So we were kind of the fun place in the neighborhood. And let's see, Shannon was probably fourth or fifth grade by then. Chris would have been probably entering seventh grade. So there were other kids in the neighborhood. So the kids had friends growing up in the neighborhood. And I was now working at the hospital as a registered nurse. I had already taken my state boards and had a good job at the hospital. I came home one day and I found David sound asleep floating out in the pool, sunburned like you wouldn't believe. At that time he was working 4 days on, 3 days off, and then 3 days on, 4 days off. But he had been working nights, and he came home in the morning, thought he would just, cool off in the pool, fell asleep, and I found him about 8 hours later. So that was fun. So we lived in that new house for quite a while, probably until Christopher was a senior in high school. Shannon would have been probably, a freshman. And they had lots of friends growing up. And life had been good. I worked as a registered nurse in the emergency room for many of those years, and then also in the operating room. And David worked at the brewery, so things were stable and life was going on. And I was dealing with rheumatoid disease, I think, as I mentioned before. Got that in my early 20s, and by the time the weekends came around, I was pretty exhausted. So weekends were quiet. We didn't do a lot of partying. And the year Christopher graduated, we had moved into a small rental house. And I'll tell you why. A gentleman, a real estate agent, I should say, knocked on our door one evening, and he said, I have people that are looking for a home. They've driven by and they think your home is perfect. It's exactly what they want. Would you like to sell your home? He offered a very good price, and David and I said, sure, why not? So we sold that house. I don't even know if the people ever saw it, but they didn't see it while we were there. So that was a very quick transaction. So we moved into a rental the year Christopher graduated high school. And Shannon was, again, freshman, sophomore in that age bracket. She was 3 years younger. And anyhow, then shortly after Chris graduated, he went off to college. And while he was gone, we bought another house out in the country, a very big home with a few acres of land, and lovely big home. And we liked it out there because we had been living in the village, which was very convenient, of course, if you needed milk or bread. So now we were about 3 miles out in the country. We had many gardens. David loved to garden. He had his rose garden. We had a lovely statue in the middle of the garden, which he had gotten for me for, I think it was one of our anniversaries. We had, I call a frog pond. We had a couple of ponds that we made. We had an in-ground pool put in there. We had a cabana built out by the pool. And it was a lovely home. I very much enjoyed living there. Shannon was still living with us because she was still in high school. And David used to let her drive one of his work vans, big red van. She hated driving it, but if she wanted to drive herself to school, that's what she had to take. Otherwise, she had to take the bus, the school bus, the dreaded school bus. So anyhow, we used to giggle as she'd drive down this long driveway on her way to school. Chris was going to college then, so he would come home perhaps on weekends or whatever. He was kind of doing his own thing at that time. And he loved doing photography. And I remember seeing in the newspaper the local newspaper, some pictures of hot air balloons and stuff like that. And then I realized down at the bottom it said photo by Christopher Finch. And I thought, is he going to classes or is he just out playing with his camera? But anyhow, he's a very good photographer. And let's see, we used to go skiing in the winter with friends of mine from the hospital. Shannon was doing her high school thing, having a good time. Christopher was in college. And then after Shannon graduated, she went off to school. And I can remember David and I driving her down for the first time to unload her at the school. And we were crying so hard on the way back that we ended up about 3 hours in the wrong direction. I don't know what happened, but we ended up out in the state capital of Albany. That was a very long ride home. So I'm going to end it there. And again, just a little grandmotherly chat. Being that this is a bit of a hobby farm with chickens and goats, there's not a lot of getting up at 6:30 to milk the cows, thank God. They're on a schedule, but it's a loose schedule. So anyhow, that's it. That's life on the hobby farm. No, that was me talking about David and I when we first got together. So that's it for now. Thanks for listening.